Hey there, sixth graders. Welcome to your online class. Since we are not meeting in person today because I am not at school, I'm just going to give you some directions here for some work. Looks like the camera is like really glitchy. So hopefully you're able to hear okay, and not too distracted by the glitchiness. But anyways, let's go through and talk about what it is that I want you to work on during the time that we would normally have class. And so as long as you get this done by your next class, you're in good shape. Okay, so if that means you are an AM student, you need to get this done by the next time I see you. If you are a PM student, you should get this done in the morning before you come to school. Okay, before you come to class. So let's go through and talk about a couple of things. Let's talk first about homework, just because this will not be displayed for you when you're in person today, and so I want to make sure that we know exactly what we have to do. This is not the slide I wanted. This slide. There we go. Okay. So there we go. We have homework this week is Study Island, and the assignment is called Mechanisms of Plate Tectonics. So it's again with that plate tectonics back towards the beginning of the year in the fall. For you to work on, it's due Wednesday at the end of the day, 11:59, just like all of the other ones. Make sure you're just keeping up with these. If you're not keeping up with them, this is going to turn into a huge amount of work for you to do if you have to do 4 or 5 of these in the last week and a half of school or so. So make sure you're keeping up with these. Also, any of the work that you are to be completing in class today when you're there in person, or that I'm asking you to complete when you are online, if you don't finish any of that, that also needs to be done. I'm assuming, because it's not a ton of work, I'm assuming you're going to be able to finish that stuff in class. But if you don't do what you're supposed to be doing, or you don't do the work that you're supposed to do when you're online, then yeah, you're going to have to spend other time to get it done. Okay. All right. The rest of this online session, we're going to do 2 things. One of them we're going to do together. We're going to go through 2 slides of our class notes, and then I have a second ed puzzle for you posted. This one is a virtual reality going through a plant cell. All right, so let's get to our notes first. Pause the video if you need to find your doc or your PowerPoint, or your Google slide presentation, or maybe you hand wrote. I gave you the option for your notes, and so I don't have a doc for you. It's your doc. So maybe you named it cell notes or science notes or something like that. Pause the video, find your notes, and we're going to do 2 slides of notes here together. All right. This is where we left off last time, so I'm just going to flash through these here real quick. We went through a couple things, and the last thing we wrote down was the one organelle that has the job of controlling the cell's activities, and that's the nucleus. All right, and so we talked a little bit about the nucleus here, and you see the notes, and you should already have this. So we've talked about the nucleus as an organelle. You're going to be required to know 10 different organelles for this unit. Okay, 10 different organelles, and we're going to do them all in this PowerPoint. And I categorize them by their jobs and their functions, what it is that they're doing. So the nucleus is the only one that's under this category of cell control. Remember, at the end of each slide, I'm giving you an example outside of our classroom to help kind of relate what the job is, to maybe help it be a little bit easier to understand, because I think that's always one of the hardest parts of this. And so if you can relate it to something else, sometimes it makes it a little bit easier to understand. All right, so we left off here with nucleus, and now today we're going to start with what are called boundary organelles. Boundary organelles. So up at the top here in what you see boundaries, go ahead and in your document, give a little subheading here of boundaries. As we go through the notes here today, pause as needed. Okay, make sure you're listening to me. Don't, because that's important as I explain this stuff, but pause as needed. Okay, the first type of boundary organelle is called the cell membrane. The cell membrane is on the outside of the cell, which is why it's a boundary organelle. It's not really a shape like a lot of the other ones are. It's literally this membrane that is along the outside of the cell. And it has a really important job. Its job is allowing things in and out of the cell. Now, it doesn't just allow everything in and out of the cell, and that's where this term that's up on the screen comes from, selective permeability. So let's break that term down. Selective, meaning it chooses, right? It's selecting which things can come into the cell and which things leave the cell. Permeability just means that it has the ability for materials to be able to pass through it. And I don't know if we're going to get to this year or if we're going to run out of time, but we're going to learn about some of the processes of how those materials go in and out of the cell. They're called cell transport, and there's a couple of different methods. You might have heard of the kind of funny sounding one. It's called osmosis. That's one of them that maybe hopefully we can get to here at the end of the year. So the cell membrane is has selective permeability, meaning some things are allowed to enter and leave the cell. Okay, and so let's put that in so that we remember what that means. Allows some things in and out, and then that literally is its job, its function, and so it's important for us to be explicit and write that in. It lets materials enter and leave the cell. So this is a pretty easy one. Right? It's along the boundary, so it's doing the job that you kind of would think it would do, right? That's kind of what you would think along the outside. That makes sense that the job is letting things enter and leave the cell. And I think a really easy analogy or comparison would be like a building walls or a gate. Okay, sometimes people think of it like a security guard. If you think of it as like a gate, like I have here on the notes, it's not just a gate that's always open, though, allowing anything in and out. It would have a lock on it, maybe, and only certain things have the key to be able to get in and out. That's why it's selectively permeable, right? That selective permeability. Okay, if you're not done with this, pause it, as I'm going to move on to the next one. Okay, the second organelle we're talking about today is also a boundary organelle, but it's unique as it is one of the organelles that we only find in plant cells. It's not in animal cells, and that's the cell wall. So this is still under the subcategory of boundaries, but now it's a second organelle that's a boundary organelle, and that's the cell wall. And thank you, science, for making this one easy. They didn't give it some crazy name. It's the cell wall. You guys know what a wall is, and this is pretty much doing exactly what you think a cell wall would do. And so this one's a pretty easy one. Let's talk about what it's made out of. So it's made out of this pretty rigid material that's called cellulose. Okay, cellulose. Celery. Okay, when you bite into some celery, if you ever bite into celery, if you ever see like some of those green strands of the celery that are kind of sticking out, or maybe sometimes they even get caught in between your teeth or something, that's cellulose. So think of that crunch of celery. That's, it's kind of rigid. That's the cellulose, and that's what the cell wall is made out of as well. So it's a much more rigid, hard boundary than what the cell membrane is. It's a much more rigid boundary than the cell membrane. So you could assume that part of the reason why it's rigid is that it's going to give support to the cell. And so when we talk about support, we're talking not only just shape of it, but also protection. It's going to protect the cell. Another unique quality of the cell wall is that plant cells usually have a much more regular shape. I was going to say normal, but that's not really true. A much more regular shape, usually like a square or a rectangle, is the way that we can instantly kind of just recognize, oh, must be a plant cell. And the reason it has that rigidness is because of the cell wall. When you guys did the pear deck at the beginning of this unit and learned about Robert Hooke and some of these other guys that were studying in cells for the first ones, and one of the reasons they called them cells is because it reminded them of like actual cells, right? Well, they were looking. That person was looking at an onion cell, which is a plant. And so it made sense that they saw these rigid little rectangles that they were like, oh, this is kind of like cells, okay, like jail cells or whatever they called them. All right, so like we saw when you guys did the plant cell lab, this is one of the organelles that is in a plant cell, and it is not in an animal cell. It's in a plant cell, but not in an animal cell. Not that you need to know this for our unit this year, but they have found some bacteria that have cell walls as well, but it's pretty uncommon. So we're not even going to put that in our notes, but just so that's in your head. Okay. This year we're just focusing on the differences between plant and animal cells. Those eukaryotic cells. And so it's important for you to know that they're in plant cells, but not in animal cells. All right. I don't even have a example here for this because the name says it all, right? It's a cell wall, and it pretty much acts like a wall does in everyday life, right? It's there to support the ceilings and the building and things. The cell wall is there to support the cell, right? And it helps protect. Excuse me. So I didn't even put in an example. I figured this one was pretty simple. You can write one down though if you would like to. So those are the two that are the boundary organelles. One other point here I want to give to you before I talk about the next thing that I want you to work on today is that when you look at a plant cell, even though the plant cell has both the cell membrane and the cell wall, it's the cell wall that is the outermost boundary. Okay, so it is the outermost of the cells is the cell wall, and then right along the inside of the cell wall is the cell membrane. In an animal cell, it's no cell wall, and the very first outer layer is the cell membrane. Okay, so cell membranes in both, cell walls only in plant cells. Okay. The last thing for you to do today is to go to Edpuzzle. It's not posted in Google Classroom, so go to Edpuzzle and you will see that there were 2 videos that I put in there for today. One is VR or virtual reality animal cell. One is virtual reality plant cell. I guess in the end, it doesn't really matter which one you do when, but I, in my lesson plan, told the substitute that when you're in person, you're going to watch and complete the animal cell one. And when you do the online class, you're going to do the plant cell one. Okay. There are only 1 or 2 questions at the end that are just kind of asking you for something that you learned. So just kind of pay attention. The really cool thing about this is they're filmed with 360 cameras. So not only are they like virtual reality, but they're 360 cameras, which means that you can click and drag with your mouse, and you can look up and to the side and down and all over the place when you're in the video. So it's pretty cool. If you have an actual virtual reality headset that you put like your phone into, it's even better. And you can watch it in there. You would probably have to do it in YouTube to do that though. But the videos, I found the videos on YouTube and put them into Edpuzzle. So they're there. So that's up to you. Okay. But those, right now, I would like you to work and watch the plant cell VR video, which is posted in Edpuzzle. And then when the homework is the study island. All right. All right, guys. Again, testing is Thursday, so I won't see you until Monday of next week. So hopefully I'll see you around. Good luck on your ELA tests. Make sure you're staying up with your work for me, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.